And joining us here at CMN is Dr. Gregory Popcak. Great to see you again.
Great to be here, Doug.
You've had a long history with EWTN. Way in the past we did some stuff, and then you've been doing radio, and you've always been an author. And here we're talking about a couple of books, Broken Gods, Hope, Healing, and the Seven Longings of the Human Heart, and that's by Image, and also When Divorce is Not an Option by Sophia Press.
Two very different books.
Right, you got a lot happening here. Let's talk about a lot of brokenness and divorce. Is that what you find in your practice?
Well, yeah, we do a counseling practice, of course. I have 5 associates that work with me, and we do all of our work on the telephone. So we work exclusively with a Catholic clientele all over the world, really. And we do a lot of work with marriage recovery, with depression and anxiety, and all those kinds of issues where people are looking for faithful answers to, tough marriage, family, or personal
Now, have you
struggles.
ever on the phone had a God call you up and want to talk to you about being broken? Let's talk about that, because when people hear this, we're on EWTN, and we've all been through the New Age thing with people want to think they're going to be God and things like that. So when we're talking about broken gods and things, we're not talking about the God. What are we talking about?
No, well, it's interesting. Jesus said in John 10:34, is it written in your law, you are gods? And he's quoting Psalm 82:6. Right, small g. And the point is, and this is a central Christian doctrine, that we are called to become partakers in the divine nature. Right. That's from 2 Peter 1:4. And it's interesting when you look through church history, even when they were debating the very nature of Jesus Christ, nobody was debating this idea that the Word became flesh so that the Son of Man, becoming man, might make men gods. That's a quote from St. Athanasius, by the way. And St. Thomas Aquinas said something very similar. All the church fathers, all the way through, kept talking about this whole idea, what theologians call the formula of exchange, where where God became man so that man might become God, small g. And the idea behind that is the idea that we were created to live together, live forever, and to become perfect through God's grace. And a small g God in the classic sense, where St. Mars, as the god of war, was immortal, and he was a perfect warrior, or Venus was immortal and the perfect exemplar of love, Well, each of us was created to live forever and to be perfect in our own way as well.
But not on Mount Olympus.
But not on Mount Olympus, that's right.
Okay. Now
and there's a big difference between the Christian idea of what's called divinization and sort of the New Age version of the divine human.
Which has made a lot of people nervous about when sometimes you discuss these things to make sure we always have to qualify what our terms mean. That's always important. Because you talk about what would change in your life as a result of having become that sort of a divinely actualized person. Perhaps a better question, what wouldn't change? Why is that an important question?
Well, everybody talks about, how God has an incredible plan for your life. We hear that, it's almost become cliche. But I think that everybody stops short of realizing what that incredible plan truly is. And that is to take us as human beings and transform us into something eternal. So something, a small g God, that is able to live with him forever and be loved by him forever. And that's quite a divine reclamation project. That's not just about becoming our best selves. That's becoming about a transformed person from the inside out, becoming, as Scripture says, a new creation. And so when we give ourselves over to God, he's not just trying to help us become better at limping along or better citizens of the island of misfit toys. He's actually encouraging us, or through his grace, enabling us to become partakers in his divine nature.
You say, in this book you talk about the idea, we'll explore the shocking truth about divinization, the ancient and surprisingly orthodox Christian assertion that God truly intends to make you a God, and that what it means, practically speaking, in your life today. And again, we say small g.
Right,
small g.
There's only one God, you're not it.
And a lot of people today who don't believe in God actually think they're God.
That's right.
But they think it with a big G.
Well, that's right. And Peter Kreeft actually makes a distinction between...
They quote him in the book.
He makes a big distinction between the Christian doctrine of divinization and the sort of New Age idea. And it breaks down into 3 things. First of all, piety, worship, and then morality. Piety has to do with the idea that as Christians we know our place. We know that we're small g, and that if we can aspire to anything, it's only because of God's gracious, unmerited gift of grace. Morality has to do with the fact that we recognize that we have to conform to an objective moral law in order for us to be able to cooperate with that grace and fulfill our destiny in Christ. And then thirdly, worship reminds us that we that we approach this gift of divinization with real awe and a sense of mystery and a sense of gratitude, right? As opposed to the person who's that more New Age idea where there is no piety. I don't know my place. I'm perfect the way I am, right?
Well, it's just
I don't worship anybody but me.
You are the big God.
That's right.
And that's really what it is.
That's right. It's just glorified pride.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Well, you quote St. Augustine here, if we have been made sons of God, we have also been made gods. And it says here, you also quote Calvin, who said, the end of the gospel is to render us eventually comfortable to God, and if so, we may speak to deify us. And it's interesting, too, because you think about the Catholic idea that it's not just this blanket of snow over our brokenness that God is putting over us.
That's right.
It's that we're actually supposed to be changed.
That's right. From the inside out, we're becoming a new creation.
Right, exactly.
And so you might say, well, all right, this is all lovely from a theological standpoint, but why do we care? So what? Who cares what's in it for me, right? And that's where the rest of the book kind of comes in, where I break down these divine longings that remain in us, even though the fall has broken us.
Is that
our
the
destiny,
seven?
Yes, the seven divine longings. We were destined to be these small g gods, to live with God forever and be loved by Him forever. But the fall broke us.
As His creations. Right?
That's right. That's right.
Okay.
But those divine longings remain within us, those seven divine longings that drive us toward that divinization process if we can open ourselves up to God's grace. Because of the fall, those seven divine longings actually become distorted and often express themselves as the seven deadly sins.
Right, and you go through that whole idea. There's something here, was it coal?
Coal, yes, it's sort of the process of change, of how we can rediscover that divine longing that's hidden behind the deadly sin. So when we confront our brokenness, so often we end up beating up on ourselves, being consumed by guilt, hating on ourselves. And the problem with that is, and we think we're working really hard to change, but what that does is it actually locks down the brain and prevents us from being able to cooperate effectively with God's grace.
So there's actually a physiological aspect of this too, in the sense of curiosity, openness, acceptance, and love.
That's right. That's cool. And so curiosity has to do with, instead of judging myself, I'm going to stop and I'm going to ask, okay, what is God trying to say to me through this sin, through this brokenness that I'm committing? What is that longing that He's attempting to fulfill that I'm fulfilling in unhealthy ways? Openness is that willingness to receive that wisdom. Acceptance is the ability to sort of accept myself where I'm at, but begin to work from this point forward. Right. And love, of course, is that commitment to work for my good, that unconditional commitment to work for my good and for God's plan to be fulfilled in my life.
Okay, well, there's a good question. Is there no place for guilt? You throw that out there, and that's a lot of people today. Oh, you shouldn't feel guilty. And you make the point that I always do myself. Of course, we should feel guilty when we're doing something wrong. Otherwise, we're a sociopath. Right? But there are two kinds of guilt. What do you mean by two kinds of guilt?
Well, there's the healthy conviction of the Holy Spirit, right? And then there's a sort of a neurotic and even satanic form of guilt, right? So guilt as a conviction of the Holy Spirit should motivate us to make change and give us a sense of hope, right? So if I mess up and the Holy Spirit convicts me, I have this sense where, okay, boy, Greg, you really screwed that up, but here's what you need to do to make it right. Here's where I want you to go from here, right? So in that conviction is a sense of hope and forward movement. When it's a neurotic guilt or even a satanic guilt, a desolation, as St. Ignatius of Loyola would put it, I experience this feeling of, I failed, I'm hopeless, I'm unlovable, there's nothing I can do, I'm just going to lie here and die now, and wallow in my brokenness.
Do we do that because we think that? Do we also do that sometimes because it lets us off the hook because we say, well, I tried and I really can't do it?
I think it's both. I think it's both. Because people will have two reactions to that. One is I have to feel bad about it, right, as a way of trying to motivate myself. Other people think that if I just make myself feel bad enough about it, then I don't have to change.
Right. Well, I can admit that that's just the way I am.
That's right.
I'm not happy with it, but what am I going to do? So that's that book, Broken Gods. That's Image. You also have a book came out before that, When Divorce is Not an Option, How to Heal Your Marriage and Nurture Lasting Love.
Right.
You say when divorce is not an option. In the United States, whether we like it or not, it's always an option.
Sure,
so when is it not an option?
Well, I saw a commercial years ago now that had a bunch of kids saying things like, when I grow up, I want to be in middle management. When I grow up, I want to get downsized. When I grow up, I want to, I want to get divorced. Like all these things that no kid would ever want to grow up to do. Nobody ever gets married to get divorced. Nobody ever gets married to say, oh, well, let's just throw it all away someday. For most people, it's really not an option emotionally, even if it is legally. And so the point of the book is really to say, wherever you're at in your marriage, there are things that you can do to turn this relationship around. In the last 20 years especially, there's been a whole boatload of research that looks at happy couples, what we call marriage masters, and try to look at the habits that they have that marriage disasters don't.
Okay.
And try to say, oh, well, can we teach those habits to unhealthy couples? And the answer is yes, we can. 20 years ago.
Did people before not have those problems? They didn't have to be taught that, or is it they just didn't live in a culture where that wasn't really an option?
Yeah, it was more that. It was really that people had more support and encouragement to keep it together.
A large extended family and everything.
And also
Church.
the pressure on them from the outside to stay together and work it out.
Right, that's the way people were supposed to do.
Now you're on your own, and so we have to do more to educate couples in what they can do on their own to turn their relationships around.
Right, in the chapter here, I think it's chapter 3, 8 marriage-friendly habits.
Right.
You have here are the 8 marriage-friendly habits that almost all happy couples exist. Rituals of connection. What's a ritual of connection?
Time where couples make a point of work, play, talk, and prayer every day, and then a larger ritual once a week. So they have little time to pray together, to talk in a more meaningful way, to play together and enjoy each other's company.
Like a date night kind of thing.
Well, yeah, but even on a day-to-day basis, right? So they're not saving their marriage up for date night.
Right.
They're actually making a point of connecting every day around those 4
maybe the major event a week or something.
That's right.
Gotcha.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Emotional rapport and benevolence, self-regulation, a positive intention frame. What does it mean? What do you mean having a positive intention?
The idea that behind everything we do, there is an intention to do something good. Like, nobody ever wakes up in the morning and says, I think I'm going to really tick off my spouse today. Let me go at them. We manage to do it anyway.
Right.
But generally speaking, we think we're trying to do something good.
Right.
I believe I'm trying to get you to hear me.
We want your spouse to understand that.
That's right.
But if I made a mistake or I said this, it wasn't because I was looking at
And so if your spouse messes up,
Gotcha.
then you want to approach them with that attitude that says, look, I'm sure you didn't mean to hurt me. What were you trying to say?
And also reviewing and learning from mistakes.
Yeah, to be able to go
But
back.
you got to admit a mistake before you can learn from it,
Well,
right?
sure,
Is that a
absolutely.
problem?
And that's part of it. A lot of couples, though, they go through a problem and then they just blow past it and never go back to it or think about it again. They just hope it's never going to happen again until it does.
Right.
So reviewing and learning from those mistakes means going back and saying, look, the one thing we can agree on is that we didn't like the way that went down. How can we do this differently the next time it comes up?
Right, and is that the thing, too? Sometimes we like to think this mistake it just happened on its own without realizing that there was a pathway that led us
and
to
that each
point.
of us had something to do with it.
Right.
And the good news is that we can each take responsibility for the solution. It's the other thing that I always point out in this piece is couples get really frustrated because they can't necessarily agree on what happened. No couple, even the healthiest couple, ever agrees on what happened. What you can agree on, though, is what you want to do from this point forward.
Right.
And that's what you really want to focus on.
Right, and I think that's where Catholic forgiveness, the idea of asking forgiveness.
Exactly, charitable interpretation,
as well,
forgiveness.
and realizing that, like you said, it's a mutual respect. We love each other at the end of the day, and let's work to make sure we live that out
Absolutely.
every day and show it in front of our kids as well. Another book in the works?
Yeah, actually, Lisa and I are speaking at the World Meeting of Families in September.
Oh, great.
And so we're releasing a book called Discovering God Together, the Catholic Guide to Raising Faithful Kids, which is really about the science of passing the faith on to our children.
Okay, we'll look forward to that then.
Awesome.
We're talking here with Greg Popcak about when divorce is not an option and also broken gods. Good luck.
Terrific, Doug. Thank you so much.
And stopping by to see us here at the CMN is Dr. Francis Renda, who's the editor of this particular book, A Call to a Deeper Love, the family correspondence of the parents of St. Therese of the Child Jesus. And thank you, Doctor, for stopping by.
It's a pleasure.
Great to have you here. Well, let me ask you a little bit about yourself. You're a doctor. Do you do a lot of writing, or what's your expertise?
I practice psychoanalysis. And so the practice entails family therapy, couple therapy, marital therapy. I'm a child psychoanalyst as well as an adult psychoanalyst. So it's what we would consider a clinical practice.
Okay.
The day in, day out of working with people who are in difficulty.
And what's your connection with St. Therese and her family? Especially now we're talking here about her parents, Blessed Zelly and Louis.
My entire life I've been connected to Therese.
Why?
I found out many years later that the nun in the kindergarten used to sit me on her lap and bless me with the relic of St. Therese. She was a woman from Ireland. She told me that when she was a child, her uncle was a priest and a bishop, and he had a relic of Therese, and she used to bless me. I had no memory of that at all. So ever since
but it's stuck.
She's as real to me as you are.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's talk about now. You had a connection with Therese. Was it a natural connection for you to become interested in her parents, or how did you make that to actually work on this book?
I think it was a natural connection. I also...
Where did this book originally come from?
France.
Okay.
It was...
Was it published in '58? Is that what I saw?
Yeah,
Okay.
And I have a ministry of helping to translate books in French on Therese. We don't have very much here.
Mm-hmm.
So the major works are in French, and if Americans are going to really understand Therese, Therese is steeped in a lot of myth.
Okay.
We've held her to be this little girl, sweet, and she was a very strong woman who became, due to John Paul II, doctor of the church. So she had a major spirituality that's still not known. Still not known.
Well, it's amazing. So you've got, right in the beginning of the book, there's a brief sketch of Zelly Montana, who's her mother. And you say, a sound common sense that by its origin one could describe as down to earth shows that she kept her feet planted firmly on the ground, that she had a deep, selfless, sisterly affection and was not afraid of expressing reproaches and advice. Now, what did you find her to be? Why is she somebody who's going to be a saint? What is it about her life and her husband's life?
Well, if I could explain very clear, very succinctly, there was nothing that stood out about these people. But what stood out is the everyday.
I see.
What stood out is the humdrum, the difficulties.
That little way, in a sense.
Yeah, the difficulties of everyday life and a married life and a mother of children and a mother of, as a person who is a mental health professional, we get in a lot of difficulty with people because we are angry that they're not like us. I wouldn't do it your way. I'm angry with you because you do things differently. They were two different personalities, but they accepted and loved each other for the differences. He loved to travel. He loved to be on pilgrimages. She was a homebody. He had friends. He was a billiard player. He was a great pool player. She was someone who worked at home. She worked very, very hard, and she was not a social person. They accepted the difference versus being angry with each other for that. Right,
because you also mentioned that she didn't necessarily have a happy childhood.
She had a very unhappy childhood, very unhappy. Her mother was really quite brutal with her. There was a preferred older daughter who became a nun, and there was the son.
Okay, so you say we also need to understand that harmony that united the two spouses, that you said they were truly different. If Louis was rather quiet and reserved, Zelly was active and spontaneous, that they found each other together. Now, they met in a kind of interesting way. Why don't you talk about that?
Louis had no intention of being married. His mother was concerned. He was getting on in age, and he was really not concerned. Louis's mother met Zelly in lace-making school, and she found Zelly to be a wonderful, holy, personable young lady, and so she said, "You would be great for my son." And the son showed no interest. However, they were on a bridge together.
You have a picture of the bridge.
Yeah, I do.
In the book.
They were on a bridge, and they didn't know each other at all. He was going one way, she was going the other. And like a bridge that takes us to a new place, takes us to a different place. He looked at her and he thought, she's quite attractive. And she heard a voice inside say, "This is the man I've chosen for you."
So it's almost like an interlocution.
Absolutely, a locution. And so 3 months later, they were married. They were married at midnight. At 10 o'clock at night, they went to town hall with their family. And then at 12 midnight, they walked from the town hall to the church. and they were married before the Blessed Sacrament. Really quite beautiful. And I have a description in there of what I thought it looked like. Remember, there was no electricity during that time.
Right.
And so there were people holding torches for light. And when you kind of take a look at that, you'd say to yourself, Therese talked about being love in the heart of the church. Mm-hmm. And my thought is, a spark from that fire that night, is what ignited the soul of that woman, Therese.
But it's interesting too, because at the age of 4.5, Therese lost her mother. So I mean, in a sense, one would say, well, gee, you would think she was more shaped than by her father. Totally shaped by the father. The spirituality really comes from the father. I often talk and give talks about the importance of a father. It was Lewis's spirituality that really inspired this kid. Well, do you think that's generally important for children anyway, obviously, let alone daughters? In a sense, the presence of the father, and also, as we've seen before about the spiritual practices of the father, they say in many cases are a better indicator of the future practices of the children.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But the importance of the father, huh? Mm-hmm. The importance of the father.
Right. You have a quote in here from Therese. It says, God gave me a father and a mother more worthy of heaven than of earth. They asked the Lord to give them many children and to take them for himself. This desire was answered. 4 little angels flew away to heaven, and 5 children left in the arena took Jesus for bridegroom. So you can hear she actually said they lost 4 children too, who died. So that's part of the thing you document in the book as well, is the suffering and the tough times the family did.
Terrific, right? Terrific suffering. Terrific.
And also even the father later on at the end of his life suffered a series of strokes. He was suffering, they believe, from some form
arterial
of
sclerosis.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And so what people at that time thought it was insanity. Mm-hmm. He was brandishing a gun this particular day, mm-hmm. and running through the streets and trying to protect his daughters. Mm-hmm. The brother-in-law thought, we can't have this any longer, we need to put him in the hospital. So that's what happened. But the humiliation of that, Therese was accused of, because you entered the convent at such a young age, your father has gone insane. Mm-hmm.
Right, exactly. Also, I thought it was interesting, you said both, in the introduction here, it says both Louis and Zelly understood that their marriage was a call to holiness. What is it? Is it in the letters? Is that where you see that? How do you know that that's the case?
Well, what I think is important for us as Catholics is that that's our job. Our job is to help that other person, the marital couple, the marital partner, become more whole, become more holy, to be the face of Christ to that person, to my husband, to my wife. So I'm more kind, more patient, more tolerant, more accepting. That's Christ. That's our job. And I really do believe that we need to focus more on that, especially in the year of the family. Mm-hmm. Pope Francis will certainly talk about that. He has a great love of Therese.
Right, exactly. It was interesting, you were talking earlier about when they got married, they exchanged their wedding vows. And it talks about here about the idea, the image of Sarah and Tobias. Why is that important in their lives?
Tobias had gone to another town to collect some money. His dad had said to him, go to this town, there's money to be collected, that's yours. And someone said to him, you're not married. There is a very available woman, but there's a problem with her. She's had 7 husbands. On the marital night, each of the husbands died. And there was an angel, they didn't know it was an angel, but an angel who kind of said, this is the woman for you. But what we find out is that the 7 husbands died, rhetorically, because they focused on the wrong thing. It's the marital night. Christ was not present. Christ was not present. So out loud, in the church that night, Louis says, this is what I'm bringing to this marriage. I'm going to be kind, patient. I'm going to have a business. I'm going to be honest. He goes through everything. And then he gives her this medallion that he engraved, he carved. He said, I want us to be like Sarah and Tobias. I want us to have Christ as present in our marriage. I think as a psychoanalyst, I think that's what's missing in marriage. We're not anchored to anything.
Right.
They were anchored to Christ. We're not anchored. You'll hear people say, we need to have commonalities. We play golf together. You know, we play tennis together. But there's no solid anchor. These people had a focus. They had an anchor.
You need to have God at the center of that marriage. Carry forward. Just before we go, Doctor, are you working on another book we can look forward to? You want to mention it?
An 800-page, it will be the definitive book on the life of, it's a biography of Therese, by the same person who put this together, Guy Couchet, who was the Bishop of Lisieux and Bayeux, and 3,000 footnotes, 4,000 footnotes.
Okay.
So we'll tell the story very clearly like you've never heard it before.
Okay. We'll look forward to that. Speaking here with Dr. Frances Renda, who's the editor of A Call to a Deeper Love, all about Therese's parents. Thank you for joining us here at CMN.
Thanks, it's a pleasure.